All right, so welcome everybody to our diversity and inclusion panel. Thank you guys for joining us. My name is Elise. I'm with the Minnesota Timberwolves and Lynx. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a topic that is always very important, but I think now more than ever is a great time to talk about it and further the conversation. So we have a really great panel tonight. It's our first night streaming on YouTube. So for everybody who's joining us, we have the chat open in YouTube. Please feel free to throw any questions that you guys have for our panelists in there. We'll be monitoring that all night and we'll be sure to incorporate those into our discussion. So we're gonna go ahead and start. So first off, I want to mention that we have had this panel in the works for a couple months now. We've been talking about it for a while. It's such an important topic, and I think right now more than ever, it is important to talk about with the events of this previous week unfolding. So this conversation, we intended on planning it to focus on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So we really do want to steer a lot of the conversation towards that topic, but we'd be remiss if we didn't discuss a little bit about the murder of George Floyd and the ensuing protests and riots in Minneapolis and around the country. So the conversation's always been necessary. Right now, it seems especially fitting, and we're going to touch on that a little bit more later. But for right now, let's focus on advancing diversity and inclusion within our own organizations and in the industry as a whole. So first, I'm going to kind of touch on what diversity in the workplace really means, because we hear that phrase a lot and we kind of all have an idea and an image of what that means in our heads.
All have an idea and an image of what that means. All have an idea and an image of what that means. All have.
There we go. I think we got it.
There you go. Yeah. If you have the YouTube open, if you have the YouTube video open, make sure you mute it. Otherwise, that will happen.
Thank you. I was like, I hear my voice way too much. So we hear the phrase diversity in the workplace a lot, and we all kind of have an image of what that means in our heads. We think about the big players here, you know, like race, of course, and gender, maybe age, but it really encompasses a lot more. It encompasses let me read this quote. Diversity in the workplace refers to an organization that intentionally employs a workforce comprised of individuals of varying race, gender, religion, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, education, cultural background, languages, abilities, and a variety of other attributes. So it's a lot bigger than what we consider when we first hear the phrase. So we're going to try and touch on a little bit of all of that today. So first, I'm going to go ahead, we're going to go around the horn and we're going to introduce all of our panelists. So if you guys want to give a little blurb about who you are, where you work, and what you do. So Jen, you want to start?
Sure. My name is Jen Gallus. I work for the University of Georgia Athletic Association. I am the manager, I have a crazy long title, but I manage our social media accounts for our athletic department, our sales and sponsorships, and how that is included in everything. And I also manage our creative and what our digital identity is.
Sorry, I was muted. Daryl, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, Daryl Miles, Assistant Athletic Director, ahead of Illinois Athletics Video Department, known as Fine Line Productions. Been there for, about 15 years, heading over that group the last 5 or so, and in charge of all things big screen, social media, anything with moving pictures, basically our athletic department does, video department does.
Kelsey?
Hi, I'm Kelsey Miller. I'm currently based out of New York City at Major League Baseball. My title is Senior Coordinator of New Media and Original Content. So I basically work hand in hand with platform editors for our social accounts and graphic designers to come up with new and creative media. Originally from PG County, Maryland.
Nice. Cassidy?
Hi, I'm Cassidy Washta. I work for the Golden State Warriors as the coordinating producer for their studio team. So I'm helping come up with all the ideas and producing the ideas for our studio content.
And last, but certainly not least, Darius.
Darius Thomas, senior video producer, finishing up my third year, well, fourth season, but third year at University of Texas, working with mostly out sports.
Very nice. So I know we have some questions to get started on, but before we do that, I just wanted to ask if anybody has any personal stories that you guys want to share before we launch into how to hire a diverse workforce, foster that inclusivity. Geez, learn how to talk. But if anybody has any personal stories they want to share about any challenges you might have faced in your career and how you overcame them.
I guess I'll jump out there. To be honest with you, I would say every single stop that I've been at has created some sort of challenge, whether it's hard in my mind or very, not as hard. In particular, I would say my biggest challenge to date was when I was at Florida State. I was a social media manager there, and I basically, tweeted for football, men's basketball, and a couple of other sports too. And I think my biggest challenge was overcoming a fan base who was used to winning. Because when someone is like so used to a certain way of doing things, it's like when someone new comes in and then there's a new regime, a lot of things can change. So I think just the change of the program itself was something that I had to overcome, because essentially I was the voice of that program at the time. That's something that I think presented a really big challenge for me. But the way I was able to overcome it was just giving a voice to those who were the core of the program. And when I say that, I mean the athletes themselves. And I think I left a mark by doing that.
When were you at Florida State?
I was actually there before I got here. So I started there in June of 2018, and then I left in June of 2019. So I was only there for 1 year.
That was a rough year, though. I understand.
It was.
As a Seminole, I understand.
Yeah, great experience, but yeah, it was a little rough.
Anyone else want to jump on the question about a personal experience?
I think for me, I came into the Warriors when I was 21, I think. I came right out of college, and just kind of getting past the fact that I was so young, and like everyone always acknowledged the fact that I was super young. So trying to actually prove myself and show them that I did do good work. And then I eventually brought on full time. And I think that really helped me through my career and like paid off.
I think for me, I don't think I have anything I can point to along those lines, but I would say kind of in a management role that I am in, the daily task that I have of feeling like I have to continue to prove myself. It's something that I have to overcome on a daily basis. When you're in a situation that I'm in, when you're sitting in meetings or making suggestions, it actually happened today in a meeting. We were discussing what we're doing in terms of tickets, in terms of social media, social distancing, how many people we're going to have in the stadium, how many fans we're going to have, and things of that nature, and whether or not we're going to do reserve seating versus general admission, right? And in a meeting earlier, we were trying to figure out, if we're going to go reserve seating, is it a possibility we can remain flexible enough to go to accommodate more people if stipulations become a little bit more relaxed? An idea that I had is like, let's do some reserve seating here and let's do GA somewhere else, right? No, let's not do that. We want to do reserve seating. I kid you not, today we're sitting in a meeting in a meeting today, and that idea got brought up, and I kind of smiled to myself. I was like, that sounds familiar. I don't know where that came from. But you're in those situations where you feel like was my opinion not taken because of certain situations? Did you just not remember where that idea came from, or yada yada yada, right? But there's always that second guessing that's happening as I'm moving forward in these management positions, and people of color who are moving forward in this industry and moving forward in their jobs. There's always that second guessing that's happening. So I would say for me personally, it's more of a daily thing than it is a certain instance I can point to. So
wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah, I think I can, I work at a very large institution in the SEC, and having to constantly make sure that like the pressure that I put on myself too is to constantly have to prove yourself, and to constantly have to prove what you do, what you know, what your expertise is, how that makes a difference in the day-to-day life of a department. And trying to make sure that that voice is heard, and that when you're sitting in a room at a table and you know what you're talking about, and having to feel like have to be triple prepared to make sure that those things, like when anybody asks any question, like I have to have the answer 1, A, B, C, D through Z, like ready to go for it. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge that I try to take on like head on and understand it, and try to do my best to make sure that those who I work with, those who I hire, those my student assistants, like see that and saying like, okay, like you kind of have to be a certain way, and it's okay. Like, you have to be willing to make sure your voice is heard. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you're considered too pushy or too whatever. But always fighting to make sure that like at the end of the day, like the only thing I can do is make sure that like when something happens or a decision is made, that I have made my point to make sure that it's and hopefully that those above me can listen to it.
I think one of the biggest challenges for me is knowing that it's not just carrying the weight of my own expectations or whatever. It's knowing that I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing this for people who look like me, for people who are women, people who are in, the LGBTQ community. Like when you walk in the door every day, you're creating or showing that there is opportunity for people who aren't usually getting those positions. So my student athletes, like I always preach that to them, like, that there are these opportunities, but, it's not just that Darius is going to work for Darius and that's it, or just for the paycheck. I'm going this because I have a duty to fulfill for, nieces, nephews, sisters, brothers, cousins, friends, interns. Like it's a heavy burden that some others may not necessarily have to consider when they walk in the door. It's just, I'm doing the job and that's it. And for me, that's something that I personally choose to do. And that's something that I've always tried to carry with me every day.
Yeah, we have to be careful about the fact that, a lot of times in situations that minorities are seen kind of as the delegate for whatever group that they represent, right? So there is some added pressure on performance and how you interact with people. I got into instance with a superior about my body language in a meeting, and had to break down the fact that you got to be careful about the language and how you're talking to people of color in terms of those types of things, because I'm very conscious of how I'm behaving in those public settings and things of that nature. So there is pressure to represent whatever corner of this delegation that you're supposed to be representing. There is some pressure there, and people have to be aware of that.
And I think it's a lot of things that people don't, who aren't in that situation, don't ever think about. They don't have to think about it. So
they don't have to think about it. So they don't have to think about it. So they don't have to think about it.
Oh, make sure if you have the YouTube open that it's muted. Yep, there we go.
But yeah, it's something that a lot of people who have never been in that situation don't have to think about. So you're there trying 2, 3, 17 times as hard to not come across the way that they're telling you that they're perceiving you coming across. And it's a vicious cycle, I think, a lot of times.
Code switching is real. It's real.
It is indeed a thing.
It's real.
And I think, that now that you brought like code switching up, it's, a lot of times when we walk in a room, whether it's, we're the only minority or the only woman or the only, woman of color, like that's added pressure in itself, but also a lot of things that we're going through mentally, like we're thinking about, when you watch the news this week, like, thank goodness I'm not at work this week, because that would have been added pressure. Well, in the office, I'm working from home. But the added pressures of like the things that minorities constantly have to keep in the back of their mind, or that they don't have to, that they just naturally keep in the back of their mind. And, is my idea good enough? Like Daryl talked about, or I have to talk this way when I'm in a meeting, but when I go over here, then I have to talk this way, or I have to dress this way when I go to work. And then when I go, out with my friends or whatever, I'm dressing this way, having to, be a multitude of people because, just straight out, you got to be Black enough over here, or you got to be professional enough over here. And it's all of these switches that you have to turn on and off that, when you walk in the room, a lot of people who are in there don't have to, think about that, and I won't speak for the women, but they have some of those same things. Is okay, I'm in a room full of men. I have to do this so that they respect me enough, or to get, it's so many things that you have to consider that, some people may not have to.
Yeah, I've definitely been in situations where I walk into a room and I freeze up. And I'm particularly a more confident person than I perceive myself to be a lot. And when I find myself in these situations, like I said, I don't feel as confident. And it's just, a matter of thinking like, okay, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to give off the wrong perception, because you never know how someone is going to take it and run with it. And I think that's probably the scariest part, because it's like in the back of your mind, you're probably not even doing anything wrong or saying anything wrong, but someone else is like, okay, I'm taking notes on that, like, and kind of holding it against you in a sense.
And the thing is, the issue is that you don't know what people's stereotypes are of individuals, and it's difficult to, and it's not your job to kind of break that stuff down, but at the same time you also have to be cognizant of it as well. And there are people who that you may interact with, and you have friends that you may interact with that that portray themselves as not having, any kind of stereotypes or any kind of prejudice whatsoever. But you never know what instance will bring out what kind of, and us as well as minorities and women, and we have things that we're dealing with as well, that you never know what instance or a confrontation or interaction will bring up some stuff, and you go, oh, I had no idea that was there. Oh, I need to talk to somebody about this, or we need to kind of hash this stuff out. Did this bother me because this, or did this bother me because of that? So it's those things that you got to be cognizant of as well.
So as we continue this kind of discussion point, what are the benefits of having a multi-perspective workplace that encourages people to hire diversely?
I think it's beneficial because you have to think about your target audience. I mean, we all work for entities that have fans, and we all work for entities that bring in sponsorship dollars who also have fans. So we have to think about it as, okay, everybody in our fan base is not going to be of the same hue. They're not going to be from the same background. They're not the same person. So if you are an organization that puts out content towards those fans, you have to cater to all different types of audiences. I just think that's the main benefit.
And I think on like the college side, I think it's incredibly important for our student athletes to see people who look like them and in positions that have decision making or what have you. And I think that's an incredibly important thing and an incredibly powerful thing. So that if I have a female student athlete who sees me in the position that I am, I want to make sure that she now knows that that's an option for her. And I think that's something that's it's invaluable when you talk about, like, I work in higher education. I work in college sports, but I work in higher education. And I want to make sure that those who come through here, whether they be my students or my student athletes, to make sure that they leave here with the impression that they can do whatever they want to do. And I think hiring people that look like them, sound like them, have the same background, I think that's just an incredible step to do, just to make sure that those kids can see, because we're not going to be in these positions forever, and making sure that we set ourselves up to make sure that the next generation, the next group of people, feel like they can do the things, whatever that thing is, working in sports or whatever it is, they have somebody who that they feel like they have an ally or a voice in those rooms because they can see it. I think it's just an incredible thing to do.
I think going off
representation matters.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say representation matters,
No, it definitely does. And like going off the whole audience thing, the Bay Area itself is like just extremely diverse. So it helps to have all of these different opinions coming in where we can make content that everyone can kind of relate to. And I think for me specifically, our studio team is extremely diverse. So it really helps having everyone's opinions come in.
I think having a diverse workplace also provokes change. I mean, if you have the same sort of people who are doing the same things for years down the line, I mean, there's not a lot of growth potential there. So I think once people from different backgrounds start coming in, they could offer those ideas that provoke the change.
Yeah, it's also important when you think about, like, with the world around us changes, but a lot of times organizations want to stay, well, we've always been this. Well, your audience has changed, your messaging changes, but it's important to have, a diverse staff, because you want to be able to, one, understand that everything isn't just because it's good for this person doesn't mean that it's good for this group. And two, you want to make sure that you're covering all of your blind spots. I mean, even when Jen and I worked together at Georgia, fun times, because countless amounts of nights at their house, like coming up with ideas and covering, hey, does this messaging work for women? Does this messaging work for the natural fan? Does this work for minorities? And you're thinking about all of that. If everyone in the room looks alike, then you're not thinking about, okay, does it work for this group? Does it work for that group? Does it work for this group? I just think that the more different ideas that you have, it just helps you grow as a whole, because, it's not the same idea or the same train of thought. Everything is, is ever changing, but at the end of the day, it's staying on brand but you're covering all your bases and all your blind spots.
At least you kind of hit it. Really, what it does is bring you perspective, right? You have different ways of looking at things, and also what it does if your staff and your community, when I say community, your larger organization is diverse enough, what it also does, it creates checks and balances. So you're in a situation where, hey, some concept may come up that that shouldn't fly. You have other individuals there that can help you keep that stuff in check. So based upon different perspectives. So that is extremely important.
I can't tell you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
I was just going to say, I can't tell you how many like ladies' nights themes I've seen that have been developed by a room full of men. And it's like, have you even considered what a woman would want at a ladies' night themed night?
You mean
or
it's not just a pink
want a ladies? Yeah, I don't necessarily want like a pink wine glass with your logo on it.
You don't want a pink wine glass in a jersey that's it's ill-fitting.
Shocking.
It's weird, right?
Weird, yeah. And then what were you gonna say, Cassie?
Even like moving away from like just the content side, like being in an actual workplace, our VP of marketing this week, she sent out an email that talked about what it was like for her growing up, or not growing up, but being in the workplace and being a single mom and having to hide the fact that she was a single mom. So like coming from, or like reading it from someone who wants to be a mom in my future, like it really hit home, because you don't really think about that stuff and think about the fact that like there are some people who feel like they have to hide that part of themselves.
I will say that's one thing that has been refreshing to see during this whole work from home situation, is that a lot of people are more comfortable recognizing that people have families and kids. And I've seen, I mean, there are going to be bad apples, but a lot of organizations have recognized the flexibility.
And I think it also has shown, I don't have kids. I have 2 dogs, but they're dogs, whatever. But they like, but also not just like having families, but having life outside of work, whatever that might look like for each individual, whether it be you are married or not, or single or not, or have kids or not. I think it's incredibly important. I think something that's been highlighted really like during this entire time is like, people have lives. And when you're working from home, it's very easy because my office is in my house. Like, this is my guest bedroom. My living room is right outside the store. And so like, I'm probably more so connected now than I ever was before, which says a lot, because like this guy keeps me connected all the time. But you can also sit there. It's so easy for people to send an email at 7 or 8 o'clock at night and expect a response because you're home. And I think that's a really hard thing for me. And I think it's something that people have started to realize is like, well, like, no, like I have a house, I have a husband, like I have dogs, I work in my yard, I cook all the time. Like I have a life outside of work. And I think it's incredible, whatever that might look like, because it's very different for me than it is for anybody else. And so, but I think it's been something that has been really, really, something that I think hopefully, and cross your fingers, that people start to see that it's like, oh, well, like you have like a life that isn't your job.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it to Brock. I don't know if he's going to show himself or he's just going to be a voice of God in this, but he has a question from our chat.
Brock from the heavens.
No, I like the disembodied voice. Great panel so far. Our first question comes from Richard. He says, for a minority working in sports or aspiring to work in sports, what is the most valuable piece of advice or lesson you've learned when navigating through the industry? Obstacles faced, overcame, etc.
I would say one of the first things, and unfortunately, this is just part of the stereotype stuff. One of the first things you got to do is you got to learn how to keep your emotions in check. if something disappointing happens to you, something negative happens to you, you can't let it rock you. You got to keep that stuff, you got to keep that in check. You got to find other ways for you to vent, and then keep on trucking, keep on moving. The fortunate thing about this industry that we're in is there's a lot of things you can do that kind of transcends what your physical appearance is. There are a lot of creative people out there that are doing some things that are phenomenal. And until you start looking them up and start try really following them, you really won't know who is who, right? But I would say really one of the first things I would do is work on fighting battles. I did a tweet a couple weeks ago where it was saying that learn to pick your battles, and then the phrase was that's too many battles, put some back. And it's something that's very important that you're going to need to learn how to do.
You're also going to have to find a good support system, whether that's at your job, in your community, on Zoom calls, in the industry. I mean, everywhere. You got to find not only one support system, but like multiple, because you may have this group that you can talk about this. You may have this group where, just talking about straight content may take your mind off of things. Like, it's very, very important, because a lot of times, especially if I've worked in this industry now for this is year 11, season 11. I look a little young, but I'm getting older. But I can count on half a hand how many minorities in content creation that I've worked with. So you can't just go to your coworker all the time, and say, hey, I'm going through this, because one, they may not understand, or two, they could be going through the same thing, but it's a little different. So sometimes you have to find those things outside of your circles, which I've done a pretty good job of having great support systems, and would not be where I am today without them.
I think, I guess a piece of advice I would give: one no is not all no's. So if you get one no, you got to keep going. Because I've gotten 10,000 no's in my career, and you just got to keep pushing, because it's easy to give up, especially when you're looking for an opportunity, or if you already have an opportunity and you're pushing an idea, or you're pushing a certain stance. I think you're automatically going to get some pushback at some point, but you just have to know that there's a way that you can break past that. And it all has to do with your own overall confidence and how you perceive either yourself or your ideas.
And then going off of that, like, make sure that your voice is heard, make sure that you're in those meetings, make sure that the right people are listening to what you have to say, because what you have to say is important, even if people don't really listen to you. Like, just put your voice out there and make your ideas heard.
Can I add to that too? If you can't be in those meetings, make sure you're pairing yourself with a good advocate. You need to make sure that when if you're not in those meetings, you have somebody there who's able to speak up for you and say, Cassidy had this idea. Hey, that was great work. Oh, that was Cassidy who did that, who's able to give you the credit that you deserve.
I think that's so incredibly important, is to make sure that you're if you can't be in that room, like you said, Daryl, like, can't be in that room, make sure somebody else is there fighting for you, because if you can't be there, I've been very fortunate that my supervisors on the whole have been that, and they can sit there and they'll never take credit for an idea that wasn't theirs. And I will never ever, and I've known Darius for a long time, and if I have a student who has an incredible idea and does incredible work, like, I will be the first person to say, like, this person did it. And to make sure that those, because it's invaluable to have making sure somebody is in there and you're not just hoping for the best, and they're not going to take the ideas that they didn't come up with.
My old boss did a really good job of making sure that I was always in meetings and making sure that my voice was really heard. And I think it's important to find somebody in your department who really does that and really speaks up for you.
And to flip it on the, administrators or, supervisor and all that, is like, you have to have that space open, because there are a lot of great ideas that never hit the surface because people aren't comfortable enough to either bring you an idea, or they're not comfortable that the higher ups will be accepting of that. So I think that's something that, we may not be able to change on the ground floor, but you got to make sure that that space is there so that people can feel comfortable enough to say, hey, I really feel strongly about this idea. What do you think? It can't just be, well, yeah, cool. It's okay. Even if I'm not going to do it right now, that may be something to keep in the back of my mind for moving forward. So.
Another one from the chat, and from the chat, I mean, this one's actually from me. One thing I kind of realized early on in my career when I started managing people and hiring my first position is I was disappointed with the lack of diversity in the applicant pool. And I had a supervisor pull me aside and say, well, what did you do to help promote diverse applicants? Do you have any tips or tricks to help hiring managers who are trying to get more diverse applicant pools to get those people in the industry and outside of it to apply?
I'll start with that one. I think broadening your circles will definitely help you, because there are a multitude of like minority groups, and you got minority photographers, and you have women's groups, and you have all these different smaller groups. But if you're not broadening your circle, or your your bank of people, then you'll never find those people. Or if you're always picking from what you know. So you got to find people that are connected to different people, whether it's women, minority men, people in underrepresented groups, who can help bring you applicants, not just one, but several. And don't just have a diverse pool, actually look at that pool and, check their work, because there's some talent out there.
I would also add to that, going to historically Black colleges and universities, one, because they have a lot of support groups on campus that cater to students who are in certain career paths, and they also hold like career fairs at schools. So I think that's a great start just for getting the minority applicants that you want. And then also to Darius's point about expanding your own circles, I think it can sometimes seem uncomfortable to reach out to people that you may not know, or you may not feel, have the same kind of thought process you do. But I also urge, like, even looking at colleges in general, not just historically Black universities, just because these colleges have set up their own resources by students, to say like, hey, can you give me your application? Like, this is the group that I have on campus. We hold, a certain amount of people who want to work in sports one day. Here, I can give you their resumes. I think building those relationships, not only with people, who are in your age group and in your status, but also just the students who attend these schools, because they're willing to work with you, as well.
I would also say along those lines, kind of piggybacking on what you guys were saying, is that you got to kind of break the cycle, right? So let's talk about collegiate athletics. You're so used to putting stuff on NCAA.com. We'll cast that net. We'll see what comes back. You put stuff maybe on your collegiate site, and let's see what comes back. Eventually, what you're going to need to do is you need to go do some networking. So you're going to need to get yourself in a situation, go to SVG, go to IDEA, and start talking to some other people who may be in touch with some of these pools. Get some names. Maybe it might not be people who maybe fit your qualifications to begin with, but at least that's a start for you to start bridging your way down a path to get to diversify your pool. That's what's, I mean, that's you start breaking the cycle of the same old. It's like the insanity quote. You know, if you keep doing the same thing and expecting the same result, it's insanity. So that's what you need to do is break your cycle and expand your pool.
So kind of going off that, we have our diverse workplace. We've hired people from minority or underrepresented groups. That's only the first step. After that, now it's time to foster inclusion in your organization. And a lot of times diversity and inclusion is kind of like people use it interchangeably, but it's not. Inclusion refers specifically to how organizations integrate everyone and make them feel welcome. So how can people who maybe aren't necessarily in the hiring process, that are just part of the organization, how can you help foster inclusivity within your organization?
I can start. For the Warriors, we have started a diversity and inclusion group where we do book clubs and we do mixers where everyone comes together and they talk about all these issues. And recently during shelter in place, we've started ERG groups. And I think that's really helped a lot of people feel more included. For me specifically, I've joined an Asian Pacific Islander group, and we're starting a women's group. And we'd never really had those before. So being able to actually come together and talk about these issues and talk about what's going on has been really helpful.
We also have resource groups at MLB too, just for honestly any group of people. But I think the inclusion part, when you break yourself off from the day to day and you're at the actual daily team that you're working with every day, those people tend to not be in those resource groups. So you can go to the resource groups and you can feel comfortable with those who may have the same mentality you do and those who look like you, but there's still a lack of inclusion when it comes to the people who are directly around you every day, all day. So I think to add or to be helpful in the inclusive way, you yourself, and when I say you yourself, I mean myself, I have to educate people on who I am, because I can't expect them to know who I am if I'm like shriveled up, if I'm unwelcoming, if I'm not, putting myself out there. So I think a large part of the inclusion relies on me as well, because I have to educate people on who I am. That way they know how to approach me, they know how to talk to me, they know, just who I am. So I think that's the most important part too.
You also have to bring people who aren't in the groups to the groups.
Curious, you said exactly what I was thinking.
I mean, like if it's a women's advocate group, like men need to come, not to take over, but to listen. You have to, make an effort to want some change or understanding. You have to create a culture where it's accepting. It's not just, okay, well, I'm going to go to this and then I'm going to try to take over and now I've done my part. Like, no, sometimes you have to just shut up and just go be a fly on the wall, listen to what's going on, take that information, not to respond, but to then think about, process, and then move forward. I think that's one of the things that we often miss the boat on a lot. Like this year, I was, and Daryl kind of pointed at this earlier, is like leaning on those people who are, from those organizations or from those backgrounds to do the work. And okay, you're Black, you're going to do Black History Month. You're a woman, you're going to do Women's History Month. Like, no, we can all lean in on this, whether we're a part of those communities or not. We're all in this together. And when you have that mentality, then you can move forward, not just, okay, well, we got the checkbox because Daryl did this or Cassidy did this or Jen did this, and it's done. So like this year, I was a part of the committee that planned Black History Month here at Texas. And personally, I think we did a great job for year one of the whole rebranding of the month. But March is Women's History Month. And the way that I think is like, okay, well, if I can put in the work for Black History Month, I can also put in work for Women's History Month, because that matters too. So we can't just lean on or want to do the work for the groups that we're a part of. We have to, want to do it for all of it. And that's how things get done better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea that, if I was on a group for Black History Month, I was up for Women's History Month. And I think that one of the biggest things that it's a simple step that a lot of people can do, but I think it's maybe they're a little scared of it, is joining the groups and those support groups, those support systems where it isn't what you look like or what your voice. It's joining those who are different from you, and to learn about their like culture and learn about what they want and those things, and having advocates for you that don't look like you and may look like the quote norm, and making sure that those voices, because you're right, Darius, like sit down and shut up sometimes, come in, sit down, listen, hear what they have to say, because like I will, it's fine for me to, put in the work on the, I'm very passionate of women in sports. It's a tough industry, but it's so worth it, because there are some amazing people and some amazing work that gets done. But like, if I'm willing to put that time in for women's history, then I should be able to do it for anything. And so I've really started trying to make sure that like I'm available for all of those things, because it's equally as important for what my, just like my scope is. And it's easy for me to sit there and think like this, but that exact same effort and that exact same passion I should be putting that towards every group that is a little bit underrepresented.
It's funny that you guys are mentioning those examples of Black History Month and Women's History Month. And I had so this past year, those of you who know me, I really try to carry as much as I can of that diversity and inclusion banner, right? I'm chairing this committee on the IDEA organization for diversity and inclusion. And this year, I got to the point with I'm taking Black History Month off. I'm not going to be the guy that sits up here and is like, well, we got to do stuff, guys. We have to do this, because you know what? That's part of everybody's history, right? The United States, it's part of everybody's history. And so had the conversation. I'm not really doing anything. We didn't really do a lot. Then we went to Women's History and we started doing some things, and had this conversation with one of the members of my staff, and they came to me and said, I noticed that we didn't really do a lot, and I didn't think that was right. And I told them, like, my feeling was, hey, I'm taking this back. This is taking a back seat to this. This shouldn't be a banner that I have to carry. This should be a banner everybody else carries. And you know what? You're right. I'm gonna do better for next year. And they said that they want to chip in and help out with this. So it's one of those things that it was kind of funny as you guys mentioned that. And then I'm like the guy going, I'm not going to do Black History Month this year. I'm going to let other people kind of take care of that and work on it. But the other aspect of, being in an inclusive environment and creating an inclusive environment, and one you guys talk about listening. The other thing I would say is, did you argue with anybody today? Did you create any conflict at all? Were you uncomfortable today? Because there needs to be some type of growth. You need to have some conversation with people who have different points of view. I'm not saying drag out dog fight like you see on social media and Twitter, where people just don't have any kind of human conscience whatsoever. I'm talking about an actual civil conversation, looking at a viewpoint, because those are the types of things that foster inclusion. When we are willing to be vulnerable and talk to individuals and lay it all out there and go, hey, I disagree with this. I disagree with this. And you get to a point where it's like, hey, you know what? Come back from the conversation. I don't necessarily agree with everything Darius said, but I really do see what he's coming from. Next time I'll approach this a little bit differently. or next time I'll consult him on this, or next time I'll consult Cassie. Hey, we had a fight about this. I'm not really all that happy about how this went down. Maybe we'll approach this a little bit differently. I'll ask her perspective on this a little bit for later on. So, we need to make sure that we're comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable. And so there needs to be some growth, and fostering some conversation is going to be important also with the inclusion aspect.
And the last thing
sorry,
go ahead, Cassie. No, it's your floor.
Going off of that, like, we had this book club where it was a book called That's What She Said. And one of our players actually came and wanted to host the book club. And it was about women's rights and like things that women go through in every aspect of their lives. And he really stepped up and just wanted to be a part of the conversation and understand where everyone else was coming from, but also like give his opinions and what he felt. And I mean, I was there and I felt like it was really eye-opening and just meant a lot to the entire organization.
Yeah, I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and that was it was like a women in sports, like a generic overarching women in sports. And I was with a friend of mine, and I was like, oh, you should go to this panel. And he was like, well, like, I don't really want to go to this panel. It's not about me. And I'm like, but you have a daughter. And like, it isn't about you, but also like it is. So it's, and like, to have those conversations and to sit there and say like, yeah, I know it's not, you have to think about other people. You have to think about those who are coming after you. And, I think about that every single day I go to work. Is, I want to make sure that like somebody looks at me and says, I appreciate what she's doing. I like her job. I like I want to take her job. I love when people tell me that, like, I want your job. And like, those are the people who come to me. And if you're those who are watching this are young in your career, like, one of the best things for me is saying like, I don't want a job like yours. I want your job. And, that's one of the most unbelievable things that I can sit there and say. And like, when I hear that, I'm like, okay, how can I help you? How can I help you? Like, sure. Like, how can I help you have this? How can I help you do this? And, whether it be, hiring people who, that have a different voice. I hire people all the time who don't work in sports, who have absolute zero cares about sports. They're just great designers or great photographers or great whatever that might be. And they come back and they're like, I never wanted to work in sports because I didn't think it was an option. And all of a sudden, like, I realized how much creative liberty you get to do it. And I'm like, yeah. So like, let's do some cool stuff together. Let's figure out a way to make it all work and blend and have different perspectives and things like that. And I think that's just something that's, it's incredibly important. It's something that I hope that we get to do, because like I said, if anybody, if somebody tells me I want your job, I'm like, cool, let's go. Let's figure out a way to do it then.
The last point I'll add on this particular segment is it's not just important to have a workplace that's diverse. It's to have a friend circle or group that is diverse too, so that you can check yourself on a daily and you'll understand. So if all your friends are the same, then you're only going to understand diversity and inclusion when you're at work. So when you have people that you can run ideas by before you take it to work, prime example, I'm going to put Jen on the spot, is they were doing Black History Month content this year. And I'm in our equipment room. I think I'm either packing stuff or I'm cleaning cameras or whatever. And she calls me, she was like, hey, are you busy? I'm like, no, I mean, I can talk. And so she runs her content by me because one, I'm Black, and two, we're friends. And she knows that I'm going to tell her, like, hey, I'm going to tell her the truth. You got to have people that tell you the truth, not people that just agree with everything that you say. And once you build that, then it makes you not only a better person, it makes you a better professional as well, because you're always keeping that thing in the back of your mind, like, okay, is this the right approach? Is this the right thing? Should I say this? Should I even be comfortable saying this kind of thing? And you just got to constantly get checked and check yourself.
I mean, that was a real I mean, I like texted, I was like, hey, I need to run this by you, because like I want to make sure that like it's the right tone, it's the right this or whatever. And I know 100% that Darius is going to tell me yes or no, and my feelings are not going to get hurt. And how can I make these things better? How can I make this make sense? How can I make this resonate in a way on a larger scale than what I can? And I appreciate so much. I mean, Darius, I used to work together, and I think it's incredibly important to be able to have that like a super open conversation, and knowing that like I'm not going to be mad or offended or upset or anything like that when he says something, because I genuinely want to make sure that like I want to know. And maybe it's a segment of population or fan base that I am not intimately aware of, and I want to make sure it resonates and does a really and does it in a really good way. And I think what we did was really good. I'm really happy with how it all came out, because it was a little bit different.
It was great.
I think we did a super different, I think we took a different take on it, but part of that was making sure that, the people who are, I'm talking about, it's Black History Month, and making sure that what I say, how it's read, how can it be perceived, and, and having a friend group to run those ideas is just incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that one. Jen, you started touching on this point before, but I kind of want to ask the other panelists their advice on this as well. The idea of paying it forward. It's important for everyone, especially in an industry like ours. But when related to diversity, I think it's a topic of conversation that's even more important. So talk a little bit about how important it is to pay it forward.
Can I start with this one?
Go for it.
Go for it.
Oh my gosh, it is so important. People have to understand, as much as we want to be in this country and talk about, well, we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and this and this, and we work hard. No, someone cracked the door open for you somewhere. And so it is extremely important, at least my philosophy. I'm not going to speak for everybody else. It is extremely important to make sure that you are providing opportunities and being a representative and caring for other people, other minorities coming through. It is so important, because those opportunities, the opportunities are so few and far between, that making sure, and I'm lucky enough that I work in the collegiate aspect. So I'm working with students who are coming through who have known nothing, and they walk away with a certain skill set. And that's one of the most prideful things that I have, especially dealing with kids of color who are coming through that program, and now they've set foot and they are prepared, more than prepared, to get in their first job or succeed in their first job. It is so important to be able to pay that stuff forward.
I think in my terms of paying it forward, because I majored in journalism twice, I find it extremely important for people to have a voice. And I feel like a lot of student athletes don't have a voice. I speak for student athletes just because that was my previous job, and I don't work directly with Major League Baseball athletes, but there have been times where I'm able to get a group of people in like baseball or softball development to say like what certain initiative means to them. So I think for me, in my version of paying it forward is always when I'm in a position or I'm in a certain spot, you have to figure out how this person can gain a larger voice and how they can reach people, because that's the most important thing to me. And I also think, to Darius's point earlier about having these support groups, and you see people that look like you who are parallel to you, network across, because that's probably one of the more important things in networking up to me. Because I mean, I see people on Twitter who look like me, and in their bios it may have, oh, I'm the social media coordinator, or I'm the video producer for this, or I'm the manager for this. And I just reach out to them and I'm like, hey, I want to connect with you in some way. So I think just, networking across and giving people a voice is how I can pay it forward personally.
I had a lot of help when I was coming to the Warriors, and I've never even thought twice about helping other people. We have a PA program, and I try to connect with them and see what they want to do and try to help them with their path. If they want to be a producer, I'm a producer. So I'm going to help them get to that point in their career where they can get a full-time job and they can be a producer, because people in my past helped me do that. And why wouldn't I pay that forward?
For me, I don't know if there's really much that's more important than paying it forward. From the jump, so, like Daryl said, someone helped me get in the door, left the crack door open. I'm gonna leave it wide open because I may be the first that walks through the door, but I'm not gonna be the last one. And that's my duty and my charge every day. I like telling the story. For me, I never got a chance to meet him. He passed away, from cancer a few years ago. But if I never saw Stuart Scott on SportsCenter, I may not have ever wanted to even work in sports outside of being, because when you're growing up in rural Mississippi, you see Black athletes, Black musicians, and, everything else is not so good. So when I was a kid growing up and seeing Stuart Scott, I was like, I want to be the next Stuart Scott. So he never got a chance to hear that story, but that for me, he did that for me, and I have to do that for, the next generation. I have three nephews, and one wants to get in the industry, and, I'm partially, responsible for that. But now I have cousins and friends and, younger people in the industry now that I pour into, because, people poured into me as well.
I think from a diversity standpoint as well, it's great that a lot of people who have helped others get to certain positions don't look like them. Because my first mentor was a white guy who worked for the Washington Nationals. And the only reason I met him was through my mom's boss, who's a lawyer. So it's you actually never know who has certain connections. And in my mom's mind, she wouldn't have known about this guy at all unless her boss told her. So I think a lot of paying it forward is, even though, you may want to help people who look like you, helping people who don't look like you is also very beneficial.
Absolutely.
I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today who is an athletic trainer, and, she was saying that, if you don't feel like you should be in if you feel uncomfortable being in a room, you shouldn't be in that room. And, she makes sure what she does is every single day is making sure that those people are, you have to, if you're a female in athletic training, which is very male dominated, is to make sure that you have to, know your shit. Sorry if you can't curse, but know it. But also that door for her is always open. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what school you work with. It doesn't matter where you worked. You want to make sure that you've opened a door for somebody else, because it's so important to pay it forward. And I say this for people in the sports industry, because every single person on this panel had a door open for them at some point. And it means the world. It meant the world to me as a 20-year-old who didn't know anything, and to have a door open for me. And I will do absolutely everything I absolutely can to make sure that door is open for someone else. And so my phone, my email's always open, my DMs are always open. If you want to jump on a Zoom call or a phone call, like I'm always going to do it because, it's working in sports is not easy. Getting in sports is even harder. And when you have those connections and when you have the ability to get in it and you're really, you get there, all you want to do is make sure the rest of the people behind you have that same opportunity. And I will kick down every door, break every ceiling. It doesn't matter, to make sure that the people who want to be in it, who want to work the crazy hours, who want to do the absurd work that comes with it, that have that opportunity. And I think it's every single person who works in sports, it's your obligation to make sure that doors are open for the people behind you, because no one got here by themselves. So if you don't open the door for somebody else, like you're doing yourself a disservice, and you haven't, you're not paying it forward the way that you should have, because you definitely got that.
That's a great segue into having allies. We all of us have had allies, and it is so important for those of us to have people to be able to lift us up in certain situations and provide some of these opportunities that normally wouldn't have been there for us. I think of my late boss at Nebraska, Jeff Small. When I got into that program, I was a junior, and they don't take upperclassmen usually, and basically begged and pleaded to be part of that program, willing to volunteer and do whatever. But if it wasn't for Jeff not only providing that opportunity for me, but also looking out for the fact of the matter is I'm a person of color in this industry, knowing that this dude is going to need to know what he's talking about, because he's going to get various shots and he's only going to get one shot at it. And if he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's going to close doors for people behind him if he doesn't. So it's very important that we have allies that are able to help prop us up and put us in those situations and give us those opportunities.
Couple of things to kind of piggyback off of that is it is very important to have those allies. I mean, if it wasn't for previous supervisors, because I don't like the term bosses, Jay Stern, Mike Bilbo, John Bianco here at Texas, like if it wasn't for those guys, or even Joe Baker, who, it took me 2 years of being here to even meet the guy, who accepted a call and passed it to John. And, all those guys are white, and they took a chance on me. So I'd be a fool to not try to create that space for someone else. I think it's irresponsible to get to certain positions or certain levels, or any level, even you get in the door or you get on a pedestal and you kick the ladder down. Like, for what? Like, you're building things if you continue to pull people up, and you're going to go higher. So that's just, I mean, whether and the other piece of it is, for those who are trying to get into the industry or trying to get to the next level, is always understanding that you're an extension of that person too. So that's your responsibility. And, for the people who are passing names along, is like, that person is an extension of you. So you can't just pass anybody's name along. Before I pass names along, like, I like to, find out something about a person if I don't know them, or letting that person know that I'm passing along. It's like, hey, I got to believe in you before I put my stamp on you, because if I pass somebody to Daryl and they don't work out, he's going to be like, I don't trust him anymore.
I'm going to call you. That's what I'm going to do.
You're gonna call him and be like,
who is this that you sent me?
Yeah, like, bro, what is going on? And that's for anybody. If I pass somebody to Jen or Kelsey or Cassidy, like, it's very important because especially in this community that we have, I think it's very vital having this sports creative community. It's important. It's helpful. Like we've had countless amounts of people, get connected and get jobs. But, a lot of times when we post these jobs, it's like, okay, reach out to this person or that person or this person. It's like, yeah, but also we have to teach people like what to do when they are reaching out to these people who, I've reached out to people and say, hey, I may know some people, and they're like, hey, cool. And that started a relationship with me and that person. They're not going to hire them all the time. So we also have to keep that in mind. It's like, just because you pass the name along doesn't mean that person's going to get hired.
And I think when it comes to that, because I've been on the receiving end and the forwarding end of students who have worked for me that I pass along to other people, or people who have questions or whatever. And I think it's incredibly important to sit there and know that, like, I tell my students, I have a slightly different department than some. Like, it's myself, and I have 1 to 2 other students every year. And that's really the workflow when it comes to our everyday posting. We have a department that does some special features and things like that, but that do an incredible job. But, I sit there and say, like, if you work for me, you are, wherever you go, you are an extension of who I am. And I want to make sure that you're going to do a job. And if I pass your name along to somebody else, like, I'm going to do it. And I have told people before, they're like, what do you think of this person? And, I'm very honest with them, because if Daryl gets somebody who said they worked for me, I'm going to be real honest with them and say, so, I have students who do incredible work, and they have gone on to have incredible careers at very, very high profile and prominent places. And I am so unbelievably proud of them. But at the end of the day, every single one of them knows that, like, they're a reflection of me. And I don't, and I want to make sure that they are aware of that, because I think that when they get to the point to where they're in my position, I want them to be like, yeah, that makes sense.
At the end of the day, you don't want Daryl calling you.
Exactly. I don't.
No,
I don't
you do
want
not.
anybody calling me and be like, what happened with that person?
Yeah, you don't want Daryl.
I don't want that. Like, I want my people to be like, oh, I want to sit there and say, if Daryl calls me, I want him to be like, man, this person was great.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, because they are great.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Do you want anybody else? I have a whole litany of people behind me.
I think the best trait someone could have as an ally is empathy, especially for someone of color and someone who's a woman, which is kind of like a double whammy in those terms. I can spot any empathetic person, like, after 1 or 2 conversations with them. I can tell if they're an empathetic person. And a lot of times that makes me more comfortable to let them know who I am, because I will be honest and say that the minute that I don't see a person being empathetic to certain situations and how they perceive other situations, I'm not going to open up to them because I don't feel comfortable. So I think in terms of being an ally, you have to know that the person that you are seeking this, I guess, relationship with, you have to, I guess the person who wants to be an ally has to understand that the person is not going to be such an open book when they already know that they're a minority in their respective place.
I think it's important too to, like, find those people. For me personally, my manager, who Daryl, Karina, we have a great relationship, and we're kind of like at least I am. I'm an open book to her, and she fights for me. And I appreciate that so much, because you can talk to somebody all you want, but there aren't very many people who will actually fight for you and make sure that what you're saying is going to change something or is actually being heard.
Yeah, you got to make sure that you're talking to people who are going to be empathetic and not people who are going to be checking the box because that's the political correct thing to do. is I listen to your complaint, or I listen to what you had to say, and you're blowing off steam, you vented, but really someone who's willing to put themselves, to try to put themselves in your shoes, and maybe not even understand after you get done talking to them for an hour and a half, still may not be able to understand exactly what you're coming from, but that effort to try to put themselves in that spot is so important. That you got to make sure that you're talking to the right people.
I'd like to open up this question now a little bit outside of the workplace, more to society. Because I think in the last week, I don't know about you guys, but I've seen a lot of my white friends ask how they can be allies in this situation, and they want to help. What can they do? And I know that it's not the Black person that they know's responsibility to represent their entire race and explain how they can help. But do you guys have any advice from any aspect, not necessarily just race, but how people can be allies more in society and more outside of the workplace as well?
I would say one of the big things to do is, and you've kind of seen the memes that are going around. Jalen Rose had something on, I think, Get Up this morning or something like that, where it's talking about, people of color have been, you're talking about the incident in Minneapolis. People of color have been talking about this for decades, right? And we got to get past, we have to take people of color for their word, right? Because there are going to be certain experiences that white people who can't experience what we're experiencing. They're not going to be able to see some of this stuff through the same lenses, especially when we're talking about what's happening with the police. The conversations that my parents had to have with me, the kind of same conversation I'm going to have with my boys about, how to deal with police officers and things of that nature. And it still doesn't put you in a situation where you're going to come home safe. And being able to convey that and have people understand that, and may not be able, again, like I was saying before, not be able to grasp all those aspects of it, but also be able to go, hey, listen, I don't exactly understand, but I see the pain. I see the pain, and anywhere that I can help you, let's do that.
A couple things. One is being slow to speak and quick to listen. I think it's very important because, as I said earlier, a lot of times we're trained naturally to listen to respond instead of listening to comprehend. If Cassidy comes to me and says, hey, this is my experience, the worst thing that I could do is try to insert my experience into her situation. That's not me being an ally. That's me trying to take over the situation. So I think that's one of the most irresponsible things that we can do, no matter what group we represent, is trying to insert our experience into someone else's. And the other thing is, like every time that these things happen, I mean, we've seen in the last, even just in the last 10 years, how many of these have we seen? And for us, it hits a little hard because, when you see George Floyd, that's someone that looks like me. And so for me, that could have been me. And everyone doesn't have to live that experience. So just sometimes being an ally is just saying, hey, I'm here with you. I see you. I don't know what you're going through, but I'm with you. Whatever you need, I'm here. Not, hey man, this is messed up. I don't have to go through what you're going through. Cool. And then go do something else. I mean, hey, but if you don't know what to say, sometimes less is more. Sometimes not saying something isn't accepting it. Sometimes it's just, hey, I don't know what to say. So you have to kind of, create that space for yourself to say, hey, I got to be there for this person, not trying to insert who I am into the situation.
Yeah, I think for our community, I think the one thing that we want to see is just recognition, because a lot of people turn a blind eye to it. So I think just like what Darius said, if you're able to say like, listen, I recognize it, I see it, I don't like it, and I'm not particularly sure what to do, but I just want to let you know that this is how I feel. That does so much more than just not saying anything at all. And to be honest, like, we have this conversation about reparations within the Black community because of the things that we've been through before. But at the same time, when things like the George Floyd stuff happen, the good thing, and obviously there's not a good thing coming out of that situation, but the one good thing that you could possibly do is provide your own certain reparation to that family. Because a lot of the family members, they post GoFundMe's, they pair up with other organizations, just as a token of respect for that family. So I also think that's a good thing too, because you can never replace that person's life, but at the end of the day, know that that person left a bunch of people that love them behind. So do the best you can to help them.
That's great. Thank you guys. If anybody else, we're kind of nearing the end of our time here, but this has been a really great conversation. Does anybody have any final thoughts or any questions for each other that you'd like to throw out there?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jen.
Sorry. My final thought is just everybody who's watching this in this community, like, it's an incredible community. We work in an industry that is better than a lot of industries, and I firmly believe that. Just be kind, love people, and just be accepting and be here for other people, because it's not an easy industry to work in. It really isn't. And checking in on people, especially in a time where you're used to working 90 miles an hour, and you crawl to a like a 60-mile-an-hour pace, and that's weird for people. And check on them, reach out. We are really, really lucky to work in an industry that cares about those who work with us. And I think that if we continue to do it, like, this industry is unbelievable. The sports creative is, I firmly believe, the most talented of individuals when it comes to creative. And be there for each other, love one another, offer a smile or a happy thought or something like that to anybody you can come across, because when you pay it forward, it's the best feeling in the whole world when somebody who works with you, for you, whatever, goes on to do incredible things. Like, it really is that. So always open that door. My email is always open. My DMs are always open. I'm always happy to talk. So if anybody wants to hear a weird 15-minute dialogue of how I got into this crazy industry, like, happy to do it.
Daryl.
I'm just seeing if anybody else wanted to talk. Okay. I guess my final thought would be kind of along the same lines as Jen said. We work in a world where there's conflict, and we need to make sure that we're doing a better job of being empathetic, in trying our best to put ourselves in each other's shoes. I think as much as social media has created jobs in an industry for us, it also has put us in a situation where it has created some of the nastiest, most negative things that can be out there. There are a lot of keyboard warriors out there that think it'll just pop up off the mouth and say whatever they want to say. So my thing would be, we need to make sure that we're trying to put some positivity in the world, make sure that we're trying to be as empathetic as we possibly can, and make sure that we are listening. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a journey that they've gone through that made them who they are. Just because I am a black man, doesn't mean that I sit inside of a box that is a black man. There is a lot more to me. I'm a father of 3. I'm in an interracial marriage. There's a lot of things to me that make me different than Darius or anybody else out there. So everybody has a story. We need to make sure that we are empathetic to everybody around us. Please, 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 more empathy. That's what we need.
Kelsey or Cassidy? I'm going last, by the way.
I agree with what everyone has said. I think empathy is huge. You got to listen to each other, got to be there for each other. Make sure that you're there supporting everyone that is in your group.
Yeah, it's to piggyback off of what everyone else said, especially Daryl. I'm big on empathy, and I think it definitely changes the situation for an individual, especially in the workplace. As far as working in sports media, I think as a Black woman, I always give that perspective because those are my experiences. It was not made for us. And for that reason, we have to work 10 times harder. And honestly, that entails working smarter because you have to understand that you may get a certain assignment or you may be asked to do something that doesn't, require your skill set. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out how to make it work for you. And that's something that I've done in every step of the way from my own experiences. So that's something that I like to pass along to other Black women who look like me in these fields, is that try to make everything your own and just own up to who you are, because at the end of the day, everyone isn't going to accept you, but you have to be the one that's happy going into your position every day. Whether or not, others may be, or others may not be as happy as you are about yourself. So I just think that's the most important thing. And also knowing that if you shut down, people are going to, they're going to take what you give them. So know that a lot of the diversity and inclusion work falls on you too. It's not just a person who needs to reach out to you or who needs to be empathetic to you. You have to do it back to them. So those are my final thoughts. And also just like, I appreciate, being on the panel, and thanks for having me.
Here are my final thoughts. For not only supervisors, administrators, or workers, like if you're in the workplace, whether it's in college athletics or anywhere else, one of the best things that you can do is be open to someone else's perspective, or just being open to like consideration. Like if someone says, hey, I feel this way, don't try to put up a block to say, well, you shouldn't feel this way. That's one of the worst things that you could do. And that goes back to empathy, is listening to that person's struggle or situation. And, respect goes a long way. It's, to whom much is given, much is required. So if you want respect, you also have to give it. But also that, you're better together than you are apart. Like together, a team is a group of individuals who together can create more stuff. And if there's tension between that, because you have people, okay, you have this person who doesn't feel like their ideas are, being listened to, or their feelings, and then you have this person that makes them feel that way, then you're holding yourself back. Like that's one of the biggest things that you can do is holding yourself back, because you're not open-minded enough to, one, realize that everybody doesn't think the way that you do, and it's not about you. Like I've always, and that's one reason, like it took me years to even put content that I produced onto my pages, because it was about the brand and not about me. Obviously that has changed a whole lot in the sports industry. Like everybody has, they're putting out all this content, and I'm still I'm still a little old school in that, like, hey, it's about women's basketball and not just about, or about, the Texas football and not about me. So those are my final thoughts. And be a good person.
Yeah, I think that's the general consensus is just listen, have empathy, and be a good person. Well, I really want to thank, hey Matt. I really want to thank everybody from the panel tonight. I think this was a really engaging, interesting discussion. And like I said before, this is always an important conversation to have. But I think in light of the events that have happened the past week, this is an even more important time to have these conversations. And even though sometimes they might be uncomfortable, that's how you grow. And you sometimes need to have the uncomfortable conversations to grow more personally and professionally and within your organization. So I really appreciate all of our panelists for being on tonight, and everybody for joining us on YouTube and on our stream. I think it was a great conversation. And now I'm going to pass it along to Mr. Matt Desmond for our final thoughts from him.
Yeah, so thank you, Elise. Just echoing what Elise said, appreciate everyone coming together tonight to talk about this topic. I think everyone provided just such a unique perspective from their own experiences, and I think it's really valuable to hear that, and it just encourages others to, really just encourage diversity in the workplace. I think it's something that's definitely going to become more common, and I hope it does, because I think we definitely need more of it in the sports world and outside of sports. But I did want to just give a hint, a sneak peek of our panel for next week. We'll have a cinematography panel. It's going to be a great group of people talking about the cinematography industry. So I really urge you to make some time next Friday night to take a look at the cinematography panelists, and we will be announcing that next week. But again, appreciate everyone tonight. Definitely a lot of great insights, and it definitely inspired me. You guys did a great job, so I really applaud everyone on the panel tonight, and really look forward to more conversations about this in the future.
Thank you, guys. Everyone have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.